Hi, my name is Sandy Baird and I'm here with Vicki, the Vermont Institute of Community and International Involvement, to make a few comments on this special day in history. As many Americans may or may not know, today, June 14th, is Flag Day, a day when we are celebrating the American flag. The American flag stands for many things. One of the things that I've learned over the course of my life is the flag also stands for the Bill of Rights and our various freedoms. And I want to remind Americans today that that means that the American flag stands for constitutional rights of free speech. And that reminds me of a very important case that came before the U.S. Supreme Court in 1989. Prior to that date, in 1989, the American Republic had been consumed with protests dealing with the Vietnam War, which had consumed our country from about 1965 till about 1975 when the war was over. During that period of time, there were huge protests against that war on our campuses, in our streets, everywhere in this country. At a lot of those protests, the American flag was burned, and it was burned in contempt of the American presence in Vietnam. In some jurisdictions, that was considered a crime, that you could not act with that kind of contempt against the American flag. It simply went too far in showing hate toward our own country. But in 1989, in a case called Texas v. Johnson, those laws, local laws or statewide laws, were overturned. And it was decided that flag burning was a sign of contempt, certainly for U.S. policy, even maybe for the United States itself by American citizens. However, that is a type of free speech. And the court decided that in Texas v. Johnson in 1989 and said that people were allowed to burn the flag because it was a sign of, it was a free speech issue and people had the right to burn the American flag. Let me tell you how important that is. Yes, it was a sign of contempt. A contempt of the war, a contempt maybe even of U.S. foreign policy, and maybe even for our country. Why was that so special? Because it at least showed opposition to U.S. policy in Asia, in Vietnam. And the kind of the most important significance of that case, Texas v. Johnson, was that in America you can show contempt for our institutions because it is simply free speech. You can't, in this country, attack our institutions physically. You can't attack each other physically, but you can say almost anything in this country, even hate speech, which is unpleasant, but it is speech. And in this country, we can still use free speech, even though it's in question everywhere. The case continued after 1989 in many of our legislatures. Many of the legislatures said, we don't care what Texas v. Johnson said, and we are going to try to amend our Constitution and the U.S. Constitution by outlawing again contempt or flag burning. In the Vermont legislature, I served those years from 1992 to 1996. During that period of time, the amendment to the Constitution came up, which would have outlawed again flag burning. We, in the Vermont legislature, said, no, this is an example of free speech. The Constitution cannot and should not be amended, particularly the Bill of Rights. And so we defeated that measure, and it never became constitutional, that those laws which prohibited flag burning. So I would remind us all on Flag Day of the importance of free speech, and that even almost the most unhateful speech is still only speech. It is not physical, it is not threatening, it still is speech. And we are allowed to say almost anything in this great republic of ours. This is Sandy Baird, and this is Day in History.